The world is a scary place, and a lot of people have wanted to move to a smaller community, smaller towns, because there's just something about them that makes you feel safe. In communities with under 10,000 people, residents tend to be able to recognize more faces, vehicles, and routines. Everyone goes to the same schools, the same places of worship, the same grocery stores, and that type of familiarity creates a perceived layer of protection. Statistically, rural areas often do in fact have lower rates of reported violent crimes compared to big cities. Keyword there being reported, which reinforces the belief that nothing bad happens there. However, with this type of social intimacy, it makes people less likely to accuse their neighbors, coworkers, or family friends. Everyone is connected, so to report them for any sort of unsavory behavior can create a conflict of interest, especially for police departments. In rural areas and small towns, law enforcement tends to have fewer officers, outdated equipment, and even less training. Plus, they have personal relationships with almost everyone in town, which makes it fairly awkward to investigate a friend for something like, say, murder. And this is part of the problem with Keddie Cabin murder investigation in 1981.
Welcome to Down the Crooked Path. I'm your host, Amanda Joy. Join me as we dive into eerie and spine-chilling stories that blur the lines between reality and the unknown. From cryptids and mysterious disappearances to true crime, UFO sightings, and paranormal activity. Venture into the unknown and uncover the secrets that lie down the crooked path.
Cross-contamination happens when something that wasn't originally part of a piece of evidence ends up attached to it anyways. This can be hair, fibers, skin cell, fluids, dust, or anything else that transfers from one place to another. Once that transfer happens, the evidence is no longer a clean reflection of what was actually at the scene. It's been altered, even if the change is very minuscule. The entire idea behind preserving evidence comes from the understanding that anything that touches something else leaves a trace. That's why investigators treat every object, surface, and samples like it could link a person to a location or rule them out completely. If evidence gets mixed with material from somewhere else, those connections become unreliable. It can point to the wrong person, or it can release a link to the right one. Contamination can happen at any point. It can start from the first moment that responders walk in. Moving through a scene can shift debris, disturb dust, or even drag material from one area to another. If protective gear isn't used correctly, responders can leave behind their own prints, hair, or biological matter without even realizing it. Even something as simple as touching a surface and then touching something else can create a transfer that wasn't there before. Now, this doesn't stop at the actual scene. Evidence can be compromised while it's being collected, packaged, or transported. If items aren't sealed properly, material can leak or shift in the baggage and become damaged. If samples are stored together or handled in the same place, they can pick up material from each other. Even during lab work, evidence can be altered if tools aren't cleaned thoroughly or if samples are processed too closely together. Investigators also risk spreading material between locations. If someone moves from a primary scene to a secondary location, like a suspect's vehicle or home, without changing gear or cleaning equipment, they can bring trace materials with them, and this creates the appearance of a connection that doesn't really exist. Now, modern systems do try to reduce these risks. Electronic tracking helps document who's handled what and when. Environmental controls help keep storage containers stable. But the responsibility still comes down to the people who are working the case. Evidence has to be protected from the moment it's found until the moment it's analyzed. And if it isn't, the results can't be trusted, and the case can be weakened. However, in some cases, the most contaminated part of a case is the mind of the officers working said case, especially if the main suspects are buddy-buddies with the cops. Imagine you're investigating a scene, and the more you investigate, the deeper you get in, the more likely it looks like your best friend might be the prime suspect. Would you help him? Would you hide evidence? Would you not report evidence? Would you make it seem like nothing was reported at all? In the early 1980s, Keddie, California was tiny. It only had a population of roughly 60 to 100 residents, depending on the time of year. Rather than being a town in the traditional sense, it was more like an unincorporated community that was built around a small mountain resort. The Keddie Resort was a cluster of rental cabins along a long, narrow road in the Sierra Nevada mountains of Plumas County. This resort was in a heavily wooded area, and it was very isolated, surrounded by steep terrains. Overall, there are only around 25 to 30 cabins. By 1981, the resort was in a bit of a decline. Tourism had dropped significantly, and the maintenance around the resort was pretty inconsistent. So many of the cabins had been rented long-term to low-income families. Now, due to its small population, everyone knew everyone, so privacy was pretty limited being so close together. Everyone knew what their neighbor's business was. Had a fight with the missus? Well, the family next door knew about it. If your kids got in trouble at school, that was also the local gossip. But at the same time, because of how isolated the area was, it was pretty easy for an outsider to come and go without much oversight. To top it off, Keddie didn't have its own police department. Instead, they relied on the Plumas County Sheriff's Office, which was small and stretched thin. Living in the Keddie Resorts in cabin number 28 was 36-year-old Glenna Sharp, who mostly went by Sue. Now, she had recently separated from her husband, James Sharp, due to domestic issues, and had recently moved from Connecticut to California to start over and raise her children independently, as well as be closer to her brother, Don, who lived in the area. She was doing her best to try and stabilize the family, relying on welfare assistance while taking classes. Sue has 5 children. Her eldest is John Sharp, a 15-year-old attending Quincy High School. He was known to spend a lot of time with his best friend, Dana Wingate. Sheila Sharp is 14 years old. Then there's Tina Lynn, who is 12. And there is 10-year-old Ricky, and the youngest was Greg Sharp. The younger boys are very good friends with a local boy named Justin Smart. Cabin 28 sat near the center of the resort, close to the main road that looped through the properties. It was a single-story structure with a small living room, kitchen, one maid bedroom, and a second bedroom that was used by the boys, and a single bathroom. It was pretty small for a large family of 6, but they were able to make it work. Not to mention that the neighbors were pretty close, like the next cabin was only about 15 feet away. Sue sleeps in the main bedroom, and she shares that room with both Tina and Sheila, who, depending on the night, would sometimes sleep on a mattress and other nights in the bed. The boys all share the spare room. However, John would sometimes sleep in the living room. The room had bunk beds, which the younger boys would use together. The rooms themselves, overall, were pretty tight and had limited furniture. The living room had a couch, a few small tables, and a TV. The place was heated by a wood stove, and there were 2 entry points to the cabin, the front door, which faced the road, and the back door near the kitchen. Now, the front door was known to not always lock properly. On April 11th, 1981, Sue was at home with her youngest children. Sheila was at a sleepover over at cabin number 27 with her friend Alyssa Siebold, and she leaves her own cabin at around 8:30 that evening. She is excited to have a night away from the crowded cabin and have some time for just her and her friend. Tina is also spending part of the night with Sheila at the Siebold's home watching TV, but she returns to cabin 28 at around 9:30. It's around the time when Tina leaves that the Siebold's notice that there is a green van parked outside of cabin number 28. John has also been out earlier that day with his friend 17-year-old Dana Wingate. At around 3:30 that afternoon, they had hitchhiked into Quincy, where they had been seen at various locations in town, but returned back to cabin 28 for a sleepover as well that night. However, later in the investigation, the person who drove them home would never be interviewed. Ricky and Greg were in their room, also having a sleepover of their own with the neighbor boy from cabin 26, Justin Smart. So everyone is having a sleepover. The following day, Sheila's morning starts pretty early because it's Sunday and she wants to give some time to herself to get ready before church. So she says goodbye to Alyssa, steps out of cabin 27 and heads towards home. It's a short walk just across the resort road. She reaches cabin 28 at around 8 o'clock. She opens the front door and stops. The living room is a mess of blood and overturned things, and she is shocked. She sees 3 bodies on the floor. One is under a yellow blanket. The other 2 are bound, and she can't tell who is who. And her brain goes straight to getting help. So she drops her overnight bag and she runs back to the Seabolts. Alyssa's family doesn't have a phone, so her parents go straight to the resort office to call law enforcement. They send their eldest son, Jamie, back with Sheila. Neither of them go inside. They stay outside the front door and move to the bedroom window instead. Through the bedroom window, they can see that Ricky and Greg are in their bedroom. Justin Smart is there too. All 3 boys are sitting in the room, and they haven't seen the living room yet. Sheila and Jamie get the window open and wake the boys up. They help them climb through the window so that they don't have to go through the front of the house and see the catastrophe. At some point, this same window of time, Jamie later says that he goes through the back door briefly to see if anyone inside is still alive, but then comes back out. This means that he moves through part of the cabin before the officers arrive. While waiting for the officers, the front door is wide open and many people walk through the crime scene. The scene itself is not secured until much later in the morning. Law enforcement finally arrives at Cabin 28 at around 10 o'clock that morning. When they go inside, they see the living room is a disaster. Large amounts of blood on the floor, the walls, and even the ceiling. Some sections of the wallboard have deep gouges, and one officer later describes it as looking like someone stabbed into the wall. There are clear signs of struggle in the room and marks that show that at least one person tried to get away. The head count is grim. 3 bodies in the living room bound with tape and electrical cords. Tina is not in the cabin. Officers first find John. He's near the entry. He's on his stomach and his wrists are wrapped in medical tape, and there's an electrical cord that runs from him to Dana's feet. Dana is nearby. He's facing the other direction, and it's very clear that he has suffered some major head trauma. Both of the boys have more injuries than can be counted at that glance. Further into the room, there's Sue on her side near the couch. The blanket covers part of her, but the blood has already soaked through it. Her lower half has been stripped nude. Her mouth is packed with a blue bandana and her own underwear held in place with tape. She has stab wounds in her neck and chest and cuts across her throat that go deep enough to hit her larynx. There are marks on the side of her head that match the end of a Daisy 880 Powerline BB rifle. A butcher knife is on the small table near the kitchen, and so is a claw hammer. A bent steak knife is also on the floor that's covered in blood and is believed to have come from the Sharp cabin. The reason the knife is bent? Because the victims had been stabbed so forcefully that the strength had bent the blade. All of these are collected and sent out for testing. They find that the phone has been taken off the receiver and the cord is damaged, leading investigators to believe that this had deliberately been taken off of the hook. The sheriff at the time, Doug Thomas, believed that there had to have been more than one person involved and that they would have left the scene absolutely covered in blood, so they would have been easy to spot. The 3 younger boys are no longer in the house. They are already outside by the time the officers arrived, pulled through the bedroom window earlier that morning. None of them had any injuries, luckily. They had been asleep in the back room during the night with Justin Smart. As for Tina, well, she's nowhere to be found. She's not in the cabin. She's not in the wooded area around the cabin. Her bed is empty, and there's nothing in the room that explains where she went. Also missing is her jacket, which seems kind of odd. Once the scene has been secured, the local officers take one look at what they're dealing with and realize they are outmatched. A triple homicide and a missing child isn't something their tiny office can handle, so they call the FBI and the State Department of Justice, or the DOJ. While they waited for backup, they start knocking on every door at the resort, trying to figure out who's heard what. The answer they keep getting, though, is nothing. Every neighbor says that the night was quiet. Even the Seabolts, who were right next door, said that they didn't hear a thing. However, a couple in cabin 16 later say that they woke up around 1:15 in the morning because they heard something that sounded like muffled screams coming from the direction of the back area of cabin 28. One interesting thing is that the boys were left alive. They had been in the back room the whole time. Ricky, Craig, and Justin slept through the whole thing. No one can wrap their head around that. It's one thing for adults to miss something, but 3 kids sleeping through a violent attack in the next room feels off. Someone had asked if the boys could have been drugged, but there's nothing in the records about anyone testing them, so realistically, we just don't know. Inside the cabin, officers notice a lack of fingerprints. It looks like whoever did this wore gloves, but they do find one fingerprint on the back railing that does not belong to the family, victims, or any of the neighbors who were known to have been there. The curtains are drawn, so to them, whoever did this wanted control. There's nothing left that gives them an easy lead. DNA isn't a part of their toolkit yet. It's the early 1980s, so they're limited to what they can see and collect. Blood splatter analysis proves that everything happened in the living room. It also shows that the blood had dried at multiple stages. They also find a partial bloody footprint believed to belong to a small shoe, like a woman or a child size. Tina's, maybe? And where was Tina? By Sunday afternoon, the search teams were out in the woods and around the resort looking for anything that pointed to either a suspect or to Tina. The working idea was that Tina might have seen something and as a result was kidnapped. They don't know if she ran or if someone took her, but either way, she isn't in the cabin and she isn't anywhere nearby. On Monday, the FBI puts out an APB. It lists her with long blonde hair, a slight build, and the clothes that she had last been seen wearing, blue jeans and a light blue shirt. The bulletin goes out to the surrounding counties and over the state line to Reno. Hospitals are asked to report anyone who came in with cuts or knife wounds in the past 2 days. There is another angle that is floating around the investigators' conversations. If Tina wasn't taken because she saw something, then maybe she was the reason someone came to the cabin in the first place. Now, this isn't the official theory, but it's on the table. In the search for suspects, the investigators start looking into Sue's background, and of course, they start with the most obvious person, her ex-husband. Sheila would later report that the abuse was not limited to Sue. She says that her dad had sexually abused both her and Tina for years, and that Tina was the one that he focused on the most. Could this be why Tina was missing? Did he grab her and run? To prove this, though, they have to prove that he was even in California when this happened. He shows up in the state as soon as he hears about the murders, and the second he arrives, the police put him under surveillance. They want to know if he was around before the killings, and they want to know if he has any idea where Tina is. They sit down with him and he says that he was in his Navy base in Connecticut, and unfortunately for investigators, he can prove this. I mean, he's a terrible husband and father, but he's also 3,000 miles away when the murder happened, so it's not him. Since Tina is the one person missing, the investigators zero in on the people in her life, and one of the names that they come up with is one of her teachers. He is a guy that everyone kind of side-eyes because he keeps a framed photo of her on his desk. Like, what? It's the kind of detail that makes every parent's drop to their stomach, but he has an alibi, so he's also crossed off the list. Meanwhile, tips keep coming in. Walt Wiley from the Sacramento Bee reports that they got hundreds of them just in the first weekend. Even with the FBI and the State Department of Justice helping, the sheriff says that the whole thing feels like it's just going around in circles. Nothing is giving them any clues or any direction as to where to go. By late Monday, the lab work comes back and the knives found in the cabin are confirmed as the murder weapons. The autopsies show that Sue and John died from stab wounds and multiple blows to the head. Although Dana also received similar injuries, his cause of death was asphyxiation. It's important to note that investigators think a second hammer was also used. Even though they only have one, they narrow the window of the murders and Tina's disappearance to sometime between 11 on Saturday night and 2 in the morning on Sunday. It has been asked whether the autopsies clarified anything about sexual assault because remember, Sue is found nude from the waist down. But according to articles, there is no evidence of that. By Wednesday, police have ruled out burglary and drugs as a motive. In the same Feather River Bulletin piece, the sheriff throws out a comment about the killings possibly being a copycat situation. He doesn't explain what it's copying. He just says that there were similar crimes somewhere else in Northern California. Nothing in the available reporting points towards what exactly he means. It's just one of those other details that seems to go nowhere. All the while, the search for Tina keeps going. They're doing grid searches, running jeeps through the woods, flying helicopters, bringing in dogs, and spending hours on foot. None of it turns up anything, though. On April 12th, the formal search is suspended. Almost a month passes before investigators decide to try something different in hopes of finally getting a lead. The police bring in Justin Smart, one of the boys who survived the night in the back room, and they put him under hypnosis. While he's under, he starts talking about a dream he says he had the night of the murders. In this dream, he's on the show The Love Boat with Sue and the boys. Two men get into a fight with John and Dana and throw them overboard. One of the men is holding a pocket knife in one hand and a hammer in the other. He uses the knife to cut Sue across the chest. After that, both of the men get off the ship on life rafts. It's already strange, but it gets stranger when they hypnotize him for a second time. This time, he starts talking about Tina. He says he woke up during the attack and walked into the front room holding a blanket. One of the men grabbed her and took her outside. He came back alone, pulled a hunting knife out of the wall, and followed outside again. I mean, you can roll your eyes at hypnosis, and that's fair, but the details that Justin gives do line up with weapons found in the cabin and the crime scene. It sounds less like a dream and more like a kid who's trying to make something unimaginable, something that his brain can handle. That's exactly how a child might process something like this: dream it instead of face it. So because Justin is able to describe the appearance of the two men from his dream, investigators have competent sketches made. The sketches show two white men wearing glasses. One has a long part down the middle. The other has short hair slicked back with a mustache. The sketches are released to the public towards the end of May. The investigators describe the long-haired man as a white male between 28 and 30 years old, between 5'11 and 6'2, with dark blonde hair and gold-framed sunglasses. The man with the mustache is described as a white male between 30 and 32, with black hair combed back and gold-framed glasses as well. What investigators do not disclose publicly is that the mustache sketch resembles Marty Smart, who happens to be Justin's father. Justin later gives conflicting accounts on the night, saying that he slept through the attack and then later saying he dreamt about it. He mentions the two men wearing glasses with long hair and one with mustache, and says that one of them had a hammer. The children had watched The Love Boat the night before, which may explain the dream that he had. The sketches are drawn by Harlan Embry, an amateur who sometimes volunteers with the local police. Now, he has no formal training in forensic sketching, and it's not explained why investigators didn't use an artist from the Department of Justice or the FBI. Around this same time, there are rumors circulating about ritual motives or drug-related motives, but Sheriff Doug Thompson states that no drugs or drug paraphernalia were found at the cabin. The investigators now begin to look into Marty Smart. He's a Vietnam veteran with a criminal history who has received inpatient treatment at the VA for PTSD and anger issues. There are multiple accounts that describe him as volatile and abusive. The Plymouth News reported an allegation that he had threatened his wife, Marilyn, with a knife in 1980. People Investigates reported that he had a violent temper and that he abused both Marilyn and her son, Justin. In the same program, Sheila Sharp states that Marty once tried to run Marilyn and Justin over with his car. None of these allegations have been proven in court, but they are part of the information that was circulating the community at the time. Because of the reports and because one of the competent sketches resembles him, the investigators do want to speak with Marty. They also want to speak with a man staying with the family, John, or Bo Betty. He's an acquaintance from the VA. According to reporting by Jane Braxton Little for the Sacramento Bee, both men are considered suspects and they are questioned together. During questioning, Marty tells investigators that he heard a hammer was used in the murders and mentions that he is missing a hammer of his own. He describes it as an expensive claw hammer with a plastic blue handle. Now, his description does not match the hammer that was found at the cabin, but investigators think it's kind of weird that he would mention this in the first place. Marty also makes another statement that stands out. According to People Investigates, he said that Justin could have been at the crime scene without Marty detecting him. Again, a super weird thing to say when you're being investigated for a murder. Both Marty and Bo, though, provide alibis. As reported by the Plymouth News, they tell investigators that they were at the Keddie Backdoor Bar with Marilyn on the night of the murders. When officers follow up, multiple witnesses confirm seeing all three of them at the bar around 10 that night. Witnesses describe Marty and Bo wearing three-piece suits and sunglasses indoors. Marilyn confirms that she was with them. According to the same reporting, the three of them did not stay at the bar the entire night, though. They left after complaining about the music. Marty made such a fuss, he's so mad that he later called the bar from home to continue the complaint. And then later, he and Bo returned to the bar until closing time. Now, some investigators later note that the unusual attire and the phone call may have been intended to draw attention and establish an alibi. And personally, I think they're onto something. Now, the investigators, they basically note the timeline, the missing hammer, and Marty's remarks about Justin. But despite this, according to People's Investigates, neither Marty nor Bo are ever interviewed again. Both of the men eventually move out of Keddie shortly after the murders. By September 1981, no new suspects, no new leads, and no information about Tina's whereabouts arrives, and the investigation reaches a standstill. Over the next several years, investigators receive occasional tips about individuals connected to other Northern California homicides, but each of those leads is ruled out. No progress is made by local law enforcement, the FBI, or the California Department of Justice. The case just stands still. But then, on April 11th, 1984, on the anniversary 3 years after the murders, a man collecting bottles near Feather Falls in Butte County reports finding parts of a human skull. The location is known as Camp 18, and it's approximately 50 to 60 miles from Keddie. So the officers go to the site and they recover the skull as well as additional bones, including vertebrae. And these remains are scattered over a wide radius, most likely by wild animals. Luckily, there is enough of the skull to attempt to identify it through dental records. The remains are transferred to a local lab for investigation. Shortly after the discovery is announced publicly, a dispatcher receives a call from a man referencing the remains found near Feather Falls. The caller asks whether the investigators have considered the Keddie case, noting that the 12-year-old girl from that case was never found. The dispatcher mentions that investigators are considering whether the remains could belong to a missing 10-year-old boy from San Francisco named Kevin Collins. Reporting from the Chico Express record indicates that this theory had already been circulating in the press. 2 months later, in June of 1984, a forensic pathologist confirms that the remains do not belong to Kevin Collins. The dental records identify them as belonging to Tina Sharp. The identification resolves the question of whether Tina survived the night of the murders, but it doesn't clarify when she died. Reporting in the Sacramento Bee quotes the Plymouth Sheriff's County, saying experts believe that Tina died on November 1981, approximately 6 months after the murders. 5 days later, though, the sheriff provides a broader estimate to another outlet, stating that she died sometime prior to last fall, which would place her death between April of 1981 and the fall of 1983. Now, investigators are not able to determine a cause of death, but they do classify the manner of death as homicide. Her missing jacket is never recovered.
Looking for your next obsession? The Creators Collective Podcasts is your gateway to the dark, the chilling, and the downright fascinating. We're a community of independent podcasts with one goal: to share the best in true crime, paranormal tales, folklore, and unexplained mysteries. Whether you crave cold cases that won't stay closed, haunted histories that refuse to be forgotten, or stories that make you sleep with the lights on, there's a show waiting for you in the collective. And when you join us, you're not just listening to one podcast. You're stepping into a world of creators who love this stuff as much as you do. Check out the Creators Collective today. Follow the link in our show notes to discover your next favorite podcast. We'll be waiting for you.
Now, before any announcement is made about Tina, around the same time, the Butte County Sheriff's Office receives another anonymous call. This time, the caller states that the remains belong to Tina. This call is not documented at the time, but a tape recording of the call is later found in the bottom of an evidence box by a deputy assigned to the case, which begs the question, why didn't anybody look into this phone call? Tina's disappearance had originally been investigated by the FBI as a possible abduction, but by April 29, 1981, the FBI stepped back, stating that the California Department of Justice was handling the case adequately. The discovery of Tina's remains generated a significant amount of local attention, but once the initial coverage fades, the case returns to its previous status: dead air. The identification does not lead to any new suspects or new information about who abducted her or who killed the family in the first place. In the years following the murders, the surviving Sharp children, Sheila, Greg, and Ricky, spend their childhood in foster care. Anniversaries pass with no progress. 5 years go by, then 10. The family and others who remember the Keddie murders continue to hope for answers. Then, in 1996, 15 years after the killings, a man named Robert Joseph Silvera Jr. confesses to the Keddie murders after being arrested in connection with 17 other homicides. According to reporting in the Westwood Pine Press, investigators checked their records and determined that he was incarcerated in April of 1981. He pled guilty to 2 murders in Oregon and was ruled out as a suspect in the Keddie murders. Another 14 years pass, and during that time, both Martin Smart and John Bobo Betty die. Cabin 28 is condemned and demolished. The case receives periodical local attention each April, and investigators occasionally receive tips, but there's no significant movement. Among those questioned early in the investigation were Sue's neighbors Martin Smart and his friend John Bobetti, as we've discussed. Martin lived in 2 cabins with his wife Marilyn, who was Justin Smart's mother. Bo lived with the Smart family for approximately 10 days before the murders. Reports indicated that Marty was angry about Sue's involvement in his marital issues. After the murders, Marilyn Smart left her husband and later told investigators that she had gone to Sue Sharp for advice about leaving him, and Sue strongly encouraged it. Reports indicated that Marty was angry that Sue had encouraged Marilyn to leave him, which has been cited as a possible motive. There were also rumors that Bo had connections to organized crime in Chicago and possibly was maybe even an informant. This was reported in multiple outlets, including the Plumas News, People's Magazines, and Sacramento Bee. However, these reports have later been contributed to theories considered by investigators, but they've never been actually proven. In 2013, 32 years after the murders, Mike Gainberg was assigned to the case as a special investigator. Now, he had been a deputy with the Sheriff's County Department in 1981, but was fired shortly before the murders and rehired afterwards. He was not permitted to work on the Keddie Cabin case at the time. During his review, Mike identified procedural issues in the original investigation, including that the cabin was not secured immediately and no roadblocks were set up on the single road leading in or out of Keddie. He also located evidence that had not been processed, including a cassette tape containing the anonymous phone call from 1984, referencing the remains found at Feathers Falls and possibly belonging to Tina. The tape was found at the bottom of an unopened, unlabeled evidence box and had not been examined for more than 30 years. Now remember, the caller had referenced the remains and connected them to the Keddie Cabin case before the identification was publicly confirmed, which seems like information that at the time would only be known by the person who had helped place her remains there to begin with. During the modern review, investigators have attempted to analyze the voice recording. Now, Mike believes that the tape was deliberately hidden, placed somewhere where no one could find it. The question is by who and why? This renewed investigation also located a case log from 1981 that had been missing. The log would have documented which officers had handled specific tasks. Additional evidence in storage was found to be disorganized and possibly contaminated. Despite this, a piece of medical tape recovered near Sue Sharp's head had contained DNA that matched the tape used to bind the victims. Additionally, they discovered that the DOJ had taken some evidence from Plumas County into custody and never returned it. Even more shockingly, the revived investigation in 2016, sheriff's investigator Mike Gainberg learned of a written letter by Marty to Marilyn shortly after the murders that had been overlooked during the initial investigation and was never entered into evidence. Now, Mike has openly criticized the quality of the original casework, saying that a newly trained officer could have done a better job. The letter read, quote, "I've paid the price of your love. And now that I've bought it with 4 people's lives, you tell me we're through? Great. What else do you want?" End quote. Marilyn later states that she doesn't recall receiving the letter but recognizes Marty's handwriting. The former sheriff, Doug Thompson, also says that he first learned about the letter in 2016. Mike also locates a therapist in Reno who had treated Marty through the VA. The therapist reports that Marty confessed to him after the killings, saying that he had killed Sue, but he didn't have anything to do with the boys, John and Dana. According to the therapist, Smart said that Tina was also killed to prevent her from identifying him because she had witnessed the event. The therapist told Mike that he was surprised to learn that the investigators at the time did not act on the information, despite the fact that the therapist had reported this information in 1981 to the California Department of Justice. I mean, what in the local cover-up is going on here? Both investigator Mike and Sheriff Greg Hagwood have stated that the evidence points strongly towards Marty and Bo. Hagwood says that if the case needs to be attributed to them, he's prepared to do so, but Thomas disagrees, stating that it's easiest to assign guilt to individuals who are deceased and cannot respond, and that he doesn't believe that either man was involved. Sheriff Hagwood later stated that he wasn't inclined towards conspiracy theories, but that the number and nature of irregularities in the original investigation were difficult to ignore, and I think most of us can agree. However, there are other explanations that suggest that the Plumas County Sheriff's Office may have just been undertrained and unprepared for a homicide of this scale. The department was small and located in a rural area. This perception aligns with Hallen's razor, which states that actions attributed to malice may instead be the result of error or inexperience. Keddie and Quincy are only 7 miles apart. Quincy has a population of just under 2,000. Sheriff Greg Hagwood grew up there and was actual schoolmates with victims John Sharp and Dana Wingate. The summer before the murders, the 3 of them had worked together as teenagers on a painting crew. Hagwood's mother was a teacher who had actually taught Tina Sharp as well. Hagwood also had a childhood friend who had lived in Keddie Cabin 28 long before the Sharp family moved in. He later said that he had stayed in the cabin approximately a dozen times. Investigator Mike Gainberg also knew the boys well. At the time of the murders, he was a martial arts instructor and taught both John and Dana. He states that Dana was at his home the day before he died. Mike later said that the killings had a significant impact on the community, so there are personal stakes involved in this reinvestigation as well. In 2016, a local junk collector finds a hammer in the woods near Keddie. Believing it to be trash, he throws it into a nearby pond. Later, while reading about the Keddie murders online, he comes across information about Marty Smart reporting a missing blue-handled claw hammer in 1981. Realizing the hammer he discarded matches that description, he contacts the local law enforcement. So the investigators retrieve the hammer from the pond, and sure enough, it matches the type and appearance of hammer that Smart had said gone missing around the time of the murders. Now, Hagwood states that the location where it was found indicates that it had been intentionally placed there. The hammer, unfortunately, was too rusted and degraded for forensic testing, but it is now entered into evidence. Also in 2016, Sheila Sharp told CBS News that she had been informed that the suspects were told to leave town. She stated that this led her to believe that the case had been a cover-up. In 2018, investigators announced that DNA had been recovered from a piece of medical tape found near Sue Sharp's head. The DNA profile matches a living suspect, but the person has not been publicly identified as the investigation is ongoing. Investigators have also considered whether Tina Sharp may have been sexually assaulted before the murders. Now, her remains were too incomplete and too decomposed to determine this. Mike has considered that given the huge timeline in which she could have been murdered, it's possible that she was pregnant and that is why she was murdered. In April 2024, investigators told ABC 10 News that they believed that they were closer to resolving the case, and that at least 2 accessories after the fact are still alive. They state that additional information from the public, though, is still needed. As of the most recent updates, investigators state that there are 6 unnamed suspects that are being examined. Sheriff Greg Hagwood has said that there are individuals in the local community that possess information that has not been disclosed, and that some may have participated after the fact or have firsthand knowledge. He also states that homicide cases don't expire, and that investigators have an obligation to the surviving Sharp family. Over the year, new investigators have attempted to interview multiple officers from 1981, but many of them have declined, with some flat out saying that they don't recall the case at all. As of 2016, a $5,000 reward is offered for information leading to the arrest and prosecution of those responsible. Tips can be submitted anonymously through the Plumas County Sheriff's Office at 530-283-6360. The Secret Witness Protection Program at 775-322-4900, or a text message to 847411 with the keyword SW through the website secretwitness.com. You can also email investigator Mike Gainberg at gainberg@pcso.net. Thank you for walking down this crooked path with me. Remember, some of the most frightening things are those that lurk in our own minds. Stay curious, stay skeptical, and allow the mysteries to guide you. This is Amanda Joy, signing off. Follow the path further. If this episode left you lingering in the shadows, there's more to explore. Follow at Down the Crooked Path on TikTok and Instagram for haunting visuals, behind-the-scenes lore, and updates on upcoming episodes. Every post is another breadcrumb deeper into the strange, the forgotten, and the beautifully unsettling. Stay curious and keep walking.